Welcome once again, everyone. We are back with our Faith in Society series, discussing social issues and faith issues uh, based on the perspective of our religious leaders, as well as any opinions they have from a scholarly perspective on the state of our world and the issues that society is dealing with in a very unique way compared to history. So obviously, with all of the changes the country is dealing with and the world is dealing with COVID and its impact, we want to make sure that we have a balanced perspective, not just from the political, economic, and academic, but of course, it's important to learn the faith perspective. So once again, we have our guest speakers, Pastor Stanley Murray, who represents the Christian community, and Imam Muhammad Musri, who represents the Muslim perspective. So today's topic is going to be on a very important topic that many people feel somewhat uneasy discussing, but it's really important we bring it out into the open with a civil dialogue as we've had with our speakers, because they really respect each other and they showcase that in everything that they do to serve the community, which is the issue of race in not only just America, but around the world. But of course, it's been a focal point of the country for a long time. Some people say ever since the birth of America. So thank you guys for joining us once again. And we would like to hear your opening statements about this issue. And Pastor Stanley, as we always, we'll start with you.
Amen. Good evening, and I'm glad to be here once again. Blessings to my brother Imam as well. And as we look into this topic, it is definitely grown in perspective of I don't know if it's so much conversation as it is just being brought up. I've been noticing a lot on the media and social media how much the word racism is being brought up. I'm not quite sure how much I've seen as to a collective bargaining of sitting down to understand the other person's heart. And when you think about racism, as in the Bible, it has shown many various times and seasons where one group was superior to another. It shows you how there are various groups and individuals or tribes, if you will, how they were different. But when you begin to think about what racism really does to what we're talking about in today's world, it continues to be a poison. It continues to find a way to separate and segregate the essence of truly what God would ask of his people. And so I'm hoping that through time and through season, that we can help change someone's mind into knowing that no one is better than anyone else. However, we are different, but by being different, it makes us better. And so all of that is included into what the Bible would ask of us. And I'm sure as my brother will follow up with what the Quran asks as well.
Indeed, this issue is as old as human beings have, walked on the earth. And we see that every time a tribe or a nation faces another tribe or nation, they always look for differences to differentiate themselves, and racism is born. We have throughout human history many examples, like the children of Israel in Egypt. We have seen the examples of different nations during the Roman Empire, the Greeks, the Arabs. Everybody had at time practiced a form of racism. And the faith addresses this issue from a very simple, basic point of view, that we are all created equal. And God is not racist. God created us different, in different colors, in different, languages, cultures. in order for us to have a very beautiful variety, uh, a fruit bowl of different flavors of humans, and each one is beautiful in their own right and complete, and uh, we complement each other. So the faith perspective, it's emphasized a lot in the Quran, in Islam, that number one, we were all created from the same couple, Adam and Eve, and that we are all brothers and sisters, and that no one is superior to the other, as in chapter 49, verse 13, that, oh, humankind, we created you from a male and female, made you into nations and tribes to know one another. And the problem is when we walk away from faith, we walk away from God, and we start following our desires and our racist instincts, we start treating people differently. But if we follow God's love and God's uh, compassion, and we see everybody else in our own image and respect them as we would like to be respected, we can very easily deal with this issue of racism in its roots. And I think the church has done a great job over the years. We all know the efforts of Martin Luther King and the ministers with him, Malcolm X, other faith leaders who really were in the forefront. Before the politicians took action, it was the faith leaders, the pastors, the ministers, the imams, the rabbis who walked the streets demanding that we treat each other with love, treat each other with, as equals. And as long as we, the people, move away from God, I believe we will have racism. And if we walk to God and be with God and want to earn God's love, then we have to love each other, as we love ourselves. And so, yes, there are probably political or legal ways to address racism, but it's always find a way to come back unless we treat this disease, because it's a heart disease.
Now, Pastor and the Imam, what do you think, piggybacking on what you guys mentioned, what do you think are concrete things that society or the community can do to try to bridge a lot of these gaps of tribalism, nationalism, calling it the otherness of different people? So what can you recommend and guide people, everyday people, to do?
Well, I'm a firm believer that without information, people will use their imagination. And I think a lot of what we're seeing now is the push and the rush to create more laws, which I think open a door, yet I don't know if it changes the mindset of a person. Uh, there's a law that says that you shouldn't run a red light, yet people still run red lights. There's a law that says that you should have a handicap ramp for people who need to have handicap, but there's sometimes that it's blocked because somebody's put something there. So the following of rules is really for those who I would say choose not to follow more than it is for those who follow. Once someone has usually explained something, the mass majority generally can go along with what's happening. But what we're seeing is now is we are trying to put what I would call a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound. We believe if we just create more legalities to treating someone right, that people will just legally treat someone right. But I think all of us today could sit here and say that that's not working, and that's not going to work. Anything that does not have love in it has hate in it. Anything that does not have God in it is unholy. So we have to go back to the basics of what can we do to first find ways to love ourselves. I think a lot when you speak about the word racism and the things that it entitles, someone feels privileged and someone doesn't. someone has value or feels they have value, and the other one may feel that they don't, or they've been explained that they don't. So at the end of the day, and I have friends and myself who are in law enforcement. Our number, my number one goal is that we must find a way that there is value when two people are communicating. If at any time one person feels oppressed over another, that leaves room for conflict. Now, also, both people have to feel enough of themselves to be able to withstand what may come before them. The Bible talks about in 1 Corinthians 14 and 40, it says not some, not most, but let all things be done decently and in order. And so if you're a person of who is not a person of order, then it's very easy to fall victim to the things of the world that draw you from giving your value up. And if you're not careful, the value that you have within yourself, you will pass it on or pass it up simply because you don't like what somebody's saying to you or like what somebody's saying about you or those things of that nature. So we have to go back to the smallest of our young children. Isn't it amazing how young children are able to play with each other, regardless of their race, regardless of their backgrounds, even regardless of whether they can even speak the same language or dialect, and they seem to do fine. But somewhere along the way, they are explained or they are told or they are taught that their race is either less or more than someone else's. And I think at the end of the day, it's very important to give your children self-esteem. But there is a very fine line between confidence and arrogance. And arrogance simply says that I believe that I'm better than anyone that I talk to, anyone that I associate with, and everyone else is lesser. Well, over time, people who continue to believe that they are lesser find themselves trapped in their mind that they are lesser. So what happens over time? They did a statistical survey way back, and I think it was in the 50s, where they switched dolls. They would give the black child and the white child a doll, and then they would switch the dolls, and then it would tell the other race that because you had this doll, you were not worthy of the same person's rights and privileges as a person. And that's what we're finding out. People are using the word privilege. They're using the word white privilege. They're using the word economic privileges, rich privileges. But at the end of the day, we all have the privilege to be a human being. And we should all be respected and looked at as human beings. But we have to be realistic. There was a time in society where people of color were considered property. It is what it was. It was in the laws. Once again, we're back to legalities again. It was in the laws. It was made such to be a law. And for many, 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 many years, it was not changed. And in some states, those laws have not changed. People may have evolved out of them. They're not being used, but they are still in the books as laws. So at the end of the day, that shows us that laws don't change people. People help change people.
Amen. This is true, like you said. It's children are not born with that bias. It is a learned behavior from their environment. So we, the parents, have to watch what we say and how we treat others, because our children are watching and learning. And we have to learn from faith. God teaches us love and does not teach us hate, does not teach us to discriminate, but to really reach over. And, the second commandment, love your neighbor, God did not say what is the color of your neighbor, what is the race of your neighbor. It's like your neighbor, whoever your neighbor is, you have a duty to love them and to help them and respect them. And these timeless values that are given to us by God are vital today. Like you said, Pastor, so many laws are enacted, adding to, a mountain of laws on the books already. But if the people don't know them and they are not going to follow them, they follow their heart, they follow how they feel. So we have to really teach the heart and the mind to love and respect, rather than spend so much energy thinking and hoping that if we introduce yet another law, that somehow magically we're going to solve the problem of racism, which is not true. I respect the laws that they have a use. They have, effective ways of protecting people against, say, housing discrimination, against hiring discrimination, and so on and so forth. But often human beings find other ways to do what they want to do anyway. If they don't want to hire someone because of their race or color, they're gonna do it, and they'll find, they're not gonna tell you why, and they will find a loophole in the law to do it, and that's very unfortunate.
All right, well, thank you both. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this segment, but because this is such an important topic, we're going to have part two next time, where we talk about some specific events that have happened in American history and in modern times related to racism in our communities and societies, and how we can come together to resolve them. But I would love to close our session, today, based as a follow-up to what you guys mentioned, with the famous quote by Martin Luther King: you cannot legislate morality. It starts with the heart, seeps into the mind, and then to the rest of society. So thank you both for sharing your wisdom once again, and we look forward to seeing you in part two next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.